I'm Robert Timmons, and you're watching Weekly Words. What's up, everybody? Thank you for checking out episode 6 of Weekly Words for 2019. On this week's episode, I'm speaking straight from the Bible, so I pray that it is impactful and very timely for your life. We're going to be speaking about the concept of God never putting us in a position of disadvantage, and I'm going to talk about that through one of the events of David's life. So today we're going to be talking about 1 Samuel chapter 17. So real quick, let me kind of summarize everything for you and give you your bearings of where we are in scripture, and then I'll go ahead and talk about how we can learn from this and how we can apply this chapter and this concept to our lives. All right, so in 1 Samuel chapter 17, David has already been appointed king by God through Samuel, but he is not on the throne yet. Right now, King Saul is still sitting on the throne. David is the youngest of all of his brothers, so he is at home tending to his father's sheep. He is a shepherd boy. One day, his father comes to him and says, "Hey, David, take this food to your brothers who are fighting in the army under Saul against the Philistines." So David, being obedient, he takes the food to his brothers. Whenever he gets to the battleground, he sees that the two armies are at a standstill, the Israelites and the Philistines, and in between them is a giant, Goliath, 9-10 feet tall. Goliath, while there, is yelling all these curses and mocking the Israelites and also mocking God. And David's like, why is nobody doing anything about this? And his brothers and everybody else in the army says, "Man, you don't even have any experience. Get out of here. This is not your business." So then David, he goes to Saul and he says, "Hey, Saul, how come nobody's stopping Goliath?" And Saul said, "Hey, don't worry about it. We're handling this." And David says, "Let me do it. Let me stand up to the Goliath. Let me defeat him." King Saul is saying, "No, you don't have experience. You don't know what you're talking about. I would just be putting you up to die." And David's like, "No, let me do this. Back home, whenever I've been tending the sheep, I have to also protect them. And I've had to protect them from lions and bears. And I've fought bears and lions with my bare hands and won." So Saul's like, "All right, fine. Go ahead. Go and try to stop Goliath. Here, take my armor." David starts to put it on, but then he says, "You know what? Let me not. I haven't practiced with this. This isn't mine. I know what I got to do." So he just takes a stick, a sling, some stones, and goes and he faces Goliath. Goliath sees that David's approaching him, and he just starts mocking him and yelling at him, saying, "Hey, come here, let me kill you quickly," all this kind of stuff. And David just stands his ground and he says no. He speaks word to Goliath, and then he pulls back his slingshot, knocks Goliath out, and then goes and he cuts off Goliath's head with his own sword. And then, of course, everything else happens after that, where he gets recognized throughout the country, and then he eventually becomes king. But I want to stop right here as he defeated Goliath. So I think lots of times whenever people look at this story, David and Goliath, they look at it from the framework of of David being in an impossible situation of beating a giant, and that God was with him, and so God made the impossible possible, right? And that's what you'll get from this if you look at it from the surface. But if you look deeper, you'll see that this wasn't an impossible situation because God didn't put David in a situation where he was at a disadvantage. This whole time, David actually had the advantage, right? So if you think back to what I said in reference to chapter 17 of 1 Samuel, David mentions that while he was tending the sheep for his father, while he was operating in the place of his authority, he came across a lion and a bear that was trying to eat the sheep. And he, as the shepherd boy, he had to protect them. So he fought and wrestled a lion and a bear with his bare hands and came out victorious, right? So David, in my eyes, was already way more qualified than anybody in the army because he did something of substantial impact to protect what he had authority over. It was different than what the army had, right? And they didn't even know about that. So they saw him as inexperienced, but David's been through some stuff. Like, he knows how to fight. Like, fighting is legit his thing. So he was prepared for Goliath. It's just that nobody knew it, right? And then second, whenever he goes there, he comes from a place of confidence, not arrogance, but confidence, saying that I know that I can take down Goliath. And Goliath sees him as this small boy, and he starts yelling at him. Now, something to keep in mind about giants, and you can research this to see the genealogy of Goliath and giants and everything. They actually have some physical disabilities because of their size, right? They're not able to move that fast. They don't have good hand-eye coordination. They actually don't even have very good vision, right? They don't have very good vision, right? So that's one of the reasons why Goliath is yelling at David to come to him and to make it where Goliath does not have to move, right? So Goliath had his own disadvantages just in his existence and because of his stature. And David operated in his advantage. That's why he did not take the armor from Saul, just did what he knew, took the sling, and took down Goliath. Right? So the two things that I think is important for us to three things for us to take away from this is, one, that God did not put David in a place of disadvantage. And the reason was for that is, two, he was a good steward of where God gave him authority. And three, he walked in confidence, knowing that God had prepared him for what he needed to do in that moment. Right? He says in Psalms 23 that the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. Right? So how can we parallel that to our lives? So the first way is being a good steward of whatever God has given you authority over, right? So in scripture, you see that David was a good steward over tending to the sheep of his father, right? And in that, lots of people just looked at it as something small that David was doing and something having no significance. But in David's stewardness and his obedience and what God gave him authority over, that's where he was prepared to be able to take down Goliath, because that's where he met the lion. That's where he met the bear. And it was those experiences that prepared him to be able to take on Goliath. So in our lives, whenever we're in the job we don't want, whenever we're in the class we don't want, whenever we're surrounded by people that might not be the people we want to be surrounded by, wherever we're in those places where we think it's just insignificant, right? God is calling us and asking us to be good stewards of what he's given us authority over. Because in that season, in that realm, we are going to develop tools and experiences and lessons that we can apply to the giant that's one day going to come our path. And whenever we knock that giant down, that's going to propel us into our future and into the purpose that God has for us, right? So be a good steward of what God has currently given you authority over in this season. Second, I want to talk about how David stepped to Goliath with confidence, not with arrogance, right? He was fighting from a place of victory, not for victory, for he knew the battle was already won. So anytime we face these trials and tribulations and these hardships and this adversity, if we look at it from a framework of confidence and fighting from victory, not for victory, we can step to that knowing that God is with us. We can step to that saying that, you know what? God has provided me with everything that I need in order to be successful in this situation. I just have to apply that knowledge or apply that skill set or apply that strength or lean on him to move these obstacles out of my way, right? Like David said in Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. So I encourage everybody to look over the life of David, specifically 1 Samuel chapter 17, to see how David was a good steward of what God gave him in that moment, even though he knew that his life had a way greater calling. See, David already was anointed king, but he was still serving as a shepherd boy. He was still tending to the sheep, but he was diligent in what he had authority over in that season, and that is what propelled him to be able to ultimately take on the ultimate purpose that God has for him. So I encourage everybody to be good stewards of where you are now and what God has given you authority over, and as you come to different obstacles, walk into those obstacles with confidence and from a place of victory, not for victory, so that you can grab onto what God has for you in the future. Because God has never placed us in a position to be at a disadvantage. God always puts us in a situation where we have the advantage. Thank you for checking out this week's episode of Weekly Words. I pray that you thoroughly enjoyed it and got something positive from it. If you have any questions or suggestions for things for me to speak on in the future, feel free to email me at weeklywordsrt@gmail.com. Again, that's weeklywordsrt@gmail.com. Our next episode will be on April the 3rd, as we will be kickstarting National Poetry Month. And just like last year, I'll be honoring some of my favorite poets and poems. Until then, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you back here on the 3rd.